Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. On today's episode, we are definitely going a little bit beyond our normal purview, which usually is kind of music-based, music-oriented. But we like to get away from that from time to time and talk to other people from the area who have accomplishments of a wide variety, and we've got a great one on today. Mm-hmm. We're very happy to have our special guest, Frank Stams, former linebacker for the Cleveland Browns. Hi, Frank.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for having me on. And I always say it's important to expand your horizons, go above and beyond.
That's it. That's our goal. So I'm here with, of course, my co-host, Nick Nicholas. And Nick, I thought you might want to get this started. You know Frank?
Yeah, well, I knew his father. You know, I was back in my old days of being a teacher at Goodyear Middle School.
You taught his father?
Yeah. His father was an assistant. He was an assistant principal, and he was a well-respected man. And I just remember, hey, that's not like a Kinks song, right? But anyway, I remember him being talking to everybody in the hall one day about being on an airplane with his son, going to scout out some colleges. What was that? When you were still in high school, right?
We, how long's the show? When we're talking about my father, I was so lucky. Both my parents, mom and dad. Mom went to South High School back when it was Thornton Junior High. Yeah. I like to say the original South High, and then of course my dad was raised by the nuns. All the way back to St. Vincent St. Mary grade school, and then he went to the high school. He grew up on Broadway, son of immigrants. Yeah. There was a boarding house there ran by a couple of German Catholic family. But, fast forward, both they met at the University of Akron, and my father, after that, served some, in Korea, and then came back and started a teaching career with the Akron Public Schools. It lasted almost 40 years, and wow. I never knew what it was like. 'Cause you mentioned he was the assistant principal, and by the end of the week when we were young, my mom said, "I've had enough of them. You take them now." So he'd always attend extracurricular activities, and I never knew what it was like to go in the front door of a gymnasium. For a basketball game. He had keys to all the back doors, or he knew somebody that was working the back door, whether it was at Garfield or here at Elliott, or he would spend some time at Buchtel. But I was lucky. I could go on and on and on and talk about my dad, but I'll just say he was the original Frank Stams.
Yeah. And he was also an athlete, right? I mean, I'm a member of the Greek community as your dad was, and a lot of the guys there, the older guys, 10 or 15 years ago, would always talk about playing basketball with him.
Oh, yeah. There was a big, he was a basketball player and then played at the University of Akron. And they held an annual Greek tournament in the city of Chicago that a lot of, you had to be Greek American to play in it. I don't know what percentage, but, guys like a guy like Jerry Corfus, he was a teammate of my father's, another Akron guy, and his son John, went on to play internationally on the Greek national team. We were just over in Greece, and I gave John a call. He's doing well. The guys there was other guys that go to the HEPA that played on that, but I remember just him sharing all those stories about the Greek tournament in Chicago. A lot of good times.
Yeah. Oh, cool. The last part of what my question was, tell me a little bit about when your dad was so excited that he got to fly with you to an event where you were a prospect. Is that what? Or
coming out of high school, you go through the recruiting process, and you get you start receiving letters from universities across the nation. I was recruited by a number of universities throughout the nation, and I think the one you're talking about is my trip to Notre Dame.
Yes.
Whereas, he sent me. He actually didn't accompany me on the plane, but he put me on a plane at Akron's Muni airport with a very low ceiling at about midnight, because I had to go after my basketball game on Friday night. And my mom was there, and it was a small plane. But it was a very experienced former Navy pilot that Notre Dame sent over to pick me up. They sent over the plane to pick me up. And, we used to laugh about it all the time, is that they thought that was the last time they were ever going to see me. Because it was, right after takeoff, I'm into the clouds, and he's flying on instruments. And it was a little unnerving for me, never being in a situation like that. But the guy was a true professional.
Cool.
Yeah, it was a great, I had 5 visits coming out of high school. I went to Notre Dame, was my first, Penn State, Michigan. Went out to UCLA, which was a great visit. And then my last one was at Ohio State.
Now, you went to high school at St. Mary's, right?
Yeah, used to be the high school I went to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I stand corrected on that. And you were state champions twice?
Twice.
Yeah.
3 times.
3 times.
Yeah, well,
okay.
Let's not forget the basketball state
basketball, I was going to mention that.
Yeah,
yes, okay.
Yeah.
And you were a defensive lineman there?
I was you play in high school, especially at a smaller school like St. Vincent St. Mary, as opposed to like St. Ed's or St. Ignatius or Massillon. You pretty much played both ways.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So I ran the ball on offense, and I was a linebacker on defense.
Okay. And then you ended up at Notre Dame, of course.
I did.
Which must have been kind of a dream come true for a St. V kid, right?
It really was. I mean, it was, there's a certain amount of, mystique about Notre Dame. I think that still exists today. Certainly it existed in our household, because my father grew up, he was 16, 17, 18 when Notre Dame was experiencing one of their best periods ever, where they had a coach there named Frank Leahy.
Yeah.
And he went 4 undefeated seasons at Notre Dame. And, that kind of, that just resonated throughout America for a lot of Catholic Americans.
Sure.
And of course, doesn't hurt to go to the school that they're called the Fighting Irish. Right. Yeah. So, and it was only 4 hours down the turnpike west. It was an easy ride. And,
right.
It was, Notre Dame wasn't doing well at that time, but I still wanted to go there. It was a smaller school, only 7,500 undergraduate versus some of the bigger schools that I was looking at. So
that's Notre Dame. Is that? I didn't realize it was that.
Wow. It's to this day, I think it's still only about 8,000 undergrads. So, and if you've ever been on campus, which you probably have, it's just absolutely a beautiful pedestrian-oriented campus. And it was just a wonderful experience for me.
Yeah. And you guys were national champions.
Lucky enough, in my 5th year of all things.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So quick history there. I go in as a fullback. I thought I was going to be the next Larry Zonka. And, of course, that went by the wayside when Lou Holtz got there. I break my leg. My first his in the spring practice. He comes in, and it was December of '85. Jerry Faust had been released. He comes in December of '85. We start spring practice that following March on the field. We did a lot of conditioning before that. The very first week, I break my leg as a fullback, and I missed the entire next year. Had surgery, the whole 9 yards. And they came to me and said, "What would you like to play now? Would you like to play tight end or a linebacker?" I said, "Well, what about fullback?" They said, "No, that ship has sailed, Stams. So if you want to be part of this team," and looking back, a lot of people tell me I turned a bad break into a good one, because my position coach at that time was a guy. His was Barry Alvarez, and Barry Alvarez left Notre Dame, went on to Wisconsin as their head coach, led them to a number of great seasons. He's now currently their athletic director, and heck, they put a statue of him outside of their stadium, Camp Randall. So I was fortunate to have him as a coach, and because of that success we had in that last year, that 5th year, we go undefeated. And I was drafted in the second round by the Los Angeles Rams.
Okay. And incidentally, Nick, you may not know this, or maybe you do, but I believe that is the last time Notre Dame has been national champions.
All right.
Yes, 1988.
Thank you for pointing that out, Bob. That's the only way we stay relevant. We're like the 72 Dolphins. I'm on a big chat with all these guys that I played with. And, it's bittersweet when Notre Dame loses a game. The champagne toasts are going because then we're still relevant. Right. We're the last champions.
Oh, wow.
So you were drafted by the Rams. I knew you started there. And you were there from 89 to 91, I think.
Correct.
Sound right?
Actually, the beginning of 92. Going into that, about halfway through training camp in 92, I was traded to the Cleveland Browns.
Right. Okay. Now, for our general audience, this is where things are going to get interesting. We're talking about the Browns. Of course, the Browns, I don't think any sports team maybe in America has more avid, devoted fans and more frustrated fans.
I agree.
Yes. And so I'd like to talk to you about those years because, well, first of all, those were the years leading up to the team leaving to Baltimore. And that was the Bernie Kozar, right? You played with Bernie?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And Kevin Mack, I think.
Kevin Mack was on that team early on.
Eric Metcalf.
Yeah.
And the coach was Bill Belichick.
Bill Belichick. Yeah, that name. Yeah.
Even Nick has heard of Bill Belichick. Well, tell us about what it was like having Bill Belichick as a coach before he became the legend, of course.
Of course, I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew he was going to have some success. But looking back, he had a lot. And during the time, the one thing you want out of a coach is his consistent nature. And Bill Belichick was consistent. He was hardworking. To give you a number of stories surrounding him, there were times where I'd be leaving the facility 8 o'clock at night, and I'd go in and get some game tape to take home with me and watch. And he'd be in there on the bicycle, lights out, watching film himself, just in a complete sweat. Mm-hmm. Nobody worked harder than Bill Belichick at his craft. Mm-hmm. Wow. And he demanded the same from his players. And really, that you respect a guy that he's not asking of you anything that he's not willing to do himself. Mm-hmm. And, he put together a great staff there. Nick Saban ran the defense.
Yeah.
We had talented players, but he was fighting a culture he inherited from a coach by the name of Bud Carson.
Yes, right.
Now, I had not been there, but what Clay Matthews was telling me, and I played with Clay a little bit, and he said, Bud Carson was the complete opposite of Bill Belichick, a real player's coach. Mm-hmm. If it was raining too hard, let's stay in and watch film. With Belichick, I thought one day we'd get a break from the weather. It was maybe 10 degrees out, a foot of snow, and we're going inside. We have a little indoor facility there. So what he did is we had these 4 big bay doors at both ends of the indoor facility, and he opened them up. So it was minus the snow, but it was just as cold in the indoor facility. So he was always looking for an edge. My point being is the contrast. He was trying to redefine the culture at Cleveland, and that's a very, very hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. But the team did get better from the time that I was there. In fact, I was just watching their game against Philadelphia, and they blasted across the bottom of the screen a stat that said the last time Cleveland won at Veterans Stadium or in Philadelphia was in 1994. And I said, boy, I remember that game. I had an interception in that game.
Did you?
So despite a lot of those issues with Bill Belichick, and to your question about Bill, he was, he unfairly judged by some of the snippets you see on TV. He's a great guy, mm-hmm. And he loves football.
Yeah.
And he the one thing about him is he wasn't afraid to give his players a chance to prove him wrong. Mm-hmm. Some coaches will pigeonhole you and let their personal feelings or emotions get in the way of their judgment. He wasn't like that. Everybody had a chance to prove him wrong and to crack the starting lineup, and he gave me that chance. I remember him one time chewing Nick Saban out because Saban didn't give me enough snaps in one of the games in the preseason. And Saban actually came up and apologized to me for that. Right, how about that? And so, Bill was a very fair guy, but, he was demanding, very demanding.
Yeah. I think another thing, I mean, obviously I'll defer to your opinions on this, but another thing about Belichick is that his manner with the media was so deadpan and so minimalistic in a way, and that works with success, right? But when things are not going that great, it doesn't work so hot.
Yeah.
And I think that, I just remember at the time a lot of people were like, how is this guy the coach? He comes up, he mumbles, we can't even, he gives these 1-word, 2-word answers to everything. And, and of course it's become sort of the stuff of that people enjoy and think is funny now, but at the time, not so much. And particularly, of course, the infamous benching of Kozar was a huge thing because people loved
it's not
Bernie.
very funny when you're in the locker room before the game at Municipal Stadium and the people we had doors that were bordered the inner concourse.
Yeah.
And they're pounding on the door after the game. Bill must go. Bill must go.
Really?
I felt like they were storming the
right.
castle. No, it didn't play very well at all.
No.
And, Bill was at odds with the press, and, of course, that reflected in their reporting.
Right.
They were at odds. And then there were things that were going on. There were players that were feeding the press information that, was feeding that, I guess, resentment, if you will.
Right.
So he was fighting that as well as trying to rebuild a culture. So he had a lot going on. But I'll say this, despite of all that, up until a couple of years ago, which would have been 25 years later, we were the last team to win a playoff game in 1994.
Right, right.
So, he, that doesn't play very well when you're not winning. He didn't have the credibility that he has now.
Right.
I think he always felt like he, and this is to his detriment, that, he felt like he was being second-guessed by people that don't dedicate their lives to studying the game. Right,
right. He and Nick Saban must have been kind of a formidable duo. I mean, of course, maybe Nick wasn't quite the Nick Saban that we'd think of him today. I don't know.
No. Nick Saban wants to be a kinder, gentler version of the Nick Saban that we all know and love. I tell people today, I could always tell Nick Saban's level of frustration or anger by the shades of purple that his face would turn. And, he was a guy, he was an in-your-face guy. He wasn't, the last thing you wanted to be was embarrassed on the field or in a team meeting. And Nick Saban had no problem embarrassing anybody. But you know what? That cuts, that you're either going to respond to that and say, I'm going to prove him wrong, or you're going to go into a shell.
Right.
And, Saban was another guy that worked his tail off.
Sure.
And that's where they had, personalities. I knew Nick coming out of high school. He's at Michigan State. He recruited me to go to Michigan State. And I think, I got with the Browns. I think he still held that against me that I never went to Michigan State. Maybe that's why he didn't give me the number of snaps that I needed in that.
It was in the back of his mind all that
time. Very fiery competitor. Very fiery competitor. And he wanted his players to be the same way.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting because both Belichick and Saban have had, by their standards, kind of off years here recently. It'll be interesting to see, how they rebound. Saban not so much as Belichick. I think since Brady left, things haven't been as quite the same.
That's a great observation. Belichick's record since Brady left, I don't know if it's a winning record. And then, of course, Nick, it seems like he's kind of hit a little bit of a lull there with Alabama, and as far as they're, on the top of the SEC, if not the national charts.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see, what they do going forward.
College football's changed so much now in the last couple of years, and that's what Saban's having to deal with, is fighting for these players that used to be a cinch to sign with them. Now they can get more money, frankly, elsewhere. Is that something you ever look back at, Frank, and think to yourself, boy, I wasn't playing at the right time when I was in college?
Every day. In fact, I was thinking about that on the way down here. No, if I sound mad, if I sound jealous, it's because I am. If I sound, but you know what? I'm happy for these guys. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them. Am I jealous? Certainly. But so many people have been making a lot of money off of these players. And I know it's a bit of the wild, wild west out there as far as paying players. Mm-hmm. But, oh, well, that'll correct over time because I think there's going to be some, unfortunate consequences when you give kids, young men, that kind of money. And there are a lot of responsibility with that. Mm-hmm. And I think, they're going to want to kind of somehow temper that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Sure. This is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with Nick Nicholas, and our special guest today is Frank Stams. He played for the Cleveland Browns. He has a lot of other interesting things in his life that we will get to as well on this episode, but we're going to continue a little bit with the football if we can. So would you consider your Browns years your glory years? Your best years?
Yeah,
or maybe Notre Dame.
But let's say I've never
Mm-hmm.
thought about what should my best years. I just loved being everywhere I was, and I mean that. I was lucky. Play for Notre Dame, win a national championship.
Yeah.
They drafted a lot earlier than they projected me, which they projected me from rounds 3 to 5. Mm-hmm. But John Robinson, the head coach of the Rams at that time, along with the vice president of the team or the president of the team, a guy named John Shaw, was at the Southern Cal game where I played, and they said they liked the way that I competed, and that's what really football is all about, is how you compete. Mm-hmm. And I go out to Los Angeles, and I spent 4 years in Hollywood.
Right.
I was part of a few commercials. Mm-hmm. I met so many interesting people, and then to be traded to the Cleveland Browns, your hometown team.
Sure.
And play in front of your family and friends. I just had, it couldn't have been any better for me.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been any better for me.
Tell us some of these Hollywood stories. I heard a rumor that you were at an Oliver Stone party.
I got to know when I got out there, people are always trying to, friends of yours are connecting you with people out there. And a good friend of mine in high school, in fact, or in college, played alongside me at Notre Dame as a linebacker. In fact, he's being inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame at the Ohio State game this year. Ohio State is at Notre Dame. They're going to celebrate that. Mike Stonebreaker, his sister, was in the movie business, and so we connected and became very good friends, still friends today. And she worked on a number of films and started her, working with producers and directors like Oliver Stone. And I remember she says, come on up, we're having a post-production party or a wrap party at Oliver Stone's house. And I said, what time would you like me there? So I got there a little late. I'm sure it was LA traffic that caused that. And she says, come on, I want you to meet Oliver Stone. And I went over there, and boy, is he having a good time. Right? He had, I think, a tequila shot in one hand and a lime in the other. And he gets up in my face, nose to nose with me. And, the spit is all over me. I felt like I was being coached again in training camp. And he's telling me about his next project. I think it was Any Given Sunday.
Okay.
And how, because she introduced me as a football player and all that. And I was like, wow. Time out. I need a few tequilas to catch up with him. All right, it wasn't quite there yet, but the passion, what he did, and over the course, of time, I got to know Jason Patrick, who was part of that Brat Pack. Mm-hmm. He was, I remember, double dating with him, going to a movie with. He was dating Julia Roberts at the time.
Oh wow.
Got to know, actors like Judd Nelson. He and Lenny Kravitz had a relationship. I was dating a girl up in West Hollywood, and we were all kind of hanging out together. It was, I tell people, they ask me what's the best part of playing football in Los Angeles. I said the off season.
Sure.
Yeah.
I could tell.
Right. So, and then over the course of, she has, I visited her even when I was in Cleveland, I drove over, they were shooting Natural Born Killers at Joliet State Prison, just south of Chicago. And, we go on location there. And I'll tell you, I was probably one of the scariest time ever going to a place where, they check you into a prison. They don't care who you are.
Oh, it was still going on. It was a functioning prison.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. We were right there with all the inmates, had an escort everywhere we went.
So you end up going from L.A. to Cleveland, which had its, as you mentioned, playing for your hometown team, but also kind of a culture change moving to Cleveland, right?
Yeah. We had a little different attire in December in Cleveland versus Los Angeles. Yeah.
And then I guess your last year was in Kansas City?
So my last year was 95. I started the season with the Panthers.
Oh,
or
okay.
that off season.
Okay.
I that 94 season, we make it to the playoffs. We beat New England. Then we go to Pittsburgh, and of course we get beat there. And then I become a free agent and tested the free agent market, and I got Carolina was interested.
Okay.
Signed a nice deal down there, but I needed surgery. And I hurt my knee in the Pittsburgh game. And unfortunately that, I was plagued a lot by injuries throughout my career, but that really, the onslaught of injuries after that, is I just couldn't get healthy enough to make the team. And they released me right before the last cut. So I came back, tried to get as healthy as I could. Had an agent out of Pittsburgh, and this is really where you need an agent to help you. It's not so much when you're doing it yourself, and people see what you can do on the field. Pretty much these players can do it themselves.
Yeah.
But when you're now all of a sudden been released, and you need somebody that knows a network of all the general managers, that's when an agent goes to work for you. And he got me a tryout with Kansas City. And I remember going out there, and Marty Schottenheimer was the coach at the time.
Okay.
And I went out and tried out, and they said, okay, we'll give you a shot. So I was there for the next 6-7 weeks. Great locker room. Joe Montana was in that locker room.
Oh, wow.
Marcus Allen was in that locker
legend.
room. Yeah, and they had a good team. And then, of course, they needed, or what they told me, they needed some roster space. So they waived me, but they said, hey, can you stick around a little bit? We're not sure how this is going to work out with the other guy. They were looking at a running back. I said, well, are you going to pay me? And they said, we can't pay you. I said, well, I'm out of here. And believe it or not, that night, Cleveland called. My agent called me and said, hey, Cleveland, I like to say, recognize their mistake. They said they want you back. So I get in the car. I drive to Chicago. Spend the night with a buddy of mine. I went to school with at Notre Dame. He was from Toledo. He said, the next morning, he said, I got a call from my mom, and there's a story in the Toledo Blade that the Browns are thinking about moving. I said, get out. I said, the 28 or 30 teams of the NFL at that time, the Browns would be the last team to move. So I drive into Cleveland, pass my physical the next morning. Who walks through the door first? Art Modell.
Oh, boy.
Followed by Bill Belichick. And they made the announcement. And that's when really all heck broke loose.
Yes, right.
In Cleveland. We went back into the locker room. The reporters were everywhere. There was a buzz. Players weren't sure about their future. You talk about CYA for a lot of guys. That was it. And then over the next 8 games until the end of the season, you see every week less and less advertising was in the stadium because, it really, it was such a foul taste in so many people's mouths that they just didn't want to be associated with the team.
Yes, yeah.
I remember even the Marlboro Man that we grew up with. the Marlboro Man was gone. I was like, no, this is not Cleveland. And, I played in that last game. And, after the game, people are tearing out the benches and seating. And I saw some of the ushers trying to stop them. Finally, they gave up and said, have at it.
Yeah.
So it
that
was.
That was a strange, weird, eerie time, really.
Very eerie. Yeah. Very eerie.
Yeah.
Right.
The feeling of betrayal on the part of the fans was immense, to say the least. As we know by Art Modell's wonderful reputation in the Northeast Ohio area. So you end up out of football. I want to ask you about the devotion in that it takes to play the game at that level. It's got to be huge. And I know that it's obviously physical, but it's mental too, and I'd actually say kind of intellectual in a way. Pro football is more complicated than I think a lot of people realize. The plays and stuff, you can't be a dummy and be on a team because those things are very precise movements.
Well, I know what you're saying, but you can be a dummy and play in the NFL. You just got to be at the right position.
Okay,
they got
dumb in the right place.
They got a lot of dummy positions, all right, where the people are being told what to do all the time.
Okay.
But as a linebacker calling signals, no, you can't be it. You've got to, there's a certain amount of intellect that goes on, and you've got to be on par with the coordinator. And sometimes you've got to be ahead of the coordinator. And as for quarterbacks, sometimes quarterbacks, take the reins over from their head coaches.
Yeah.
Because it's just a different feel being on the field. But to get to that level, first I'm going to say requires a lot of support, a certain amount of luck. And he's like, well, what is luck? Luck is, to me, is when preparation meets opportunity. That happened with me. I had a lot of great guys that I played with, a lot of hard work, and luck again, staying injury free. You talk about the intellect. The big thing, the difference between college football and pro football is in college, and I said this to a head coach in the European League one time, and he offered me a job right on the spot. He said the difference, I told him, the difference between college football and pro football is in college they teach you to step with the right foot. In the NFL, they teach you how to make the play. And, I did not like the college game at all. I love the pro game because it was a game again for me.
Right.
I remember one of the first drills I did as a linebacker, you go up and take on the lineman, get to the running back. Take on the lineman, get to the running back. My coordinator finally calls me over and says, hey, listen, in this league, we're in the business of tackling ball carriers, not taking on blockers. And I thought, wow. And so that's when the game becomes so much faster than a college game because you're not going through those steps.
Right.
Progression. I just, you talk about intellect. You've got to understand what they're telling you. And you've got to make sense of it in a hurry, and you've got to make the adjustment. Because in college, they'll tell you 5, 6, 7 times because they know you're on scholarship. In the pros, you're lucky if they tell you twice.
Right.
Because they'll go find somebody else to do the job.
Sure, right. Did you get through your football career without too much chronic pain?
So, chronic pain. That's a good way to put it. I don't. Other than occasionally I get some dizziness. Forgetfulness.
Yeah.
Some things that are could be worrisome, but I'm staying on top of.
Right.
Question remains: would these be naturally occurring, or did football enhance these?
Right.
things?
Right.
And so I got to believe it's football. To me, football will accelerate some of these issues.
Sure.
They're starting to connect the dots on some of this stuff. as long as I try to, what I've discovered later in my life here in the last 3 or 4 years is stretching.
Mm-hmm.
And before I would just stretch enough to what they made you stretch. Now it's a whole routine for me. And it makes sense because, when you look at it, I think they're called yoga meisters. I don't think I've ever seen one over 115 pounds.
Right.
So there's got to be something to that. So stretching has really helped me out. I do less weightlifting. I just try to keep my weight down because at a lower weight, I feel so much better.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And then, of course, when a lot of football players, their career comes to an end, a lot of guys just kind of feel lost, right? Like they don't really know what to do.
What's their identity?
Exactly, right. And probably the longer you play, the more that is. But even so, it's still something that goes back to high school and maybe before in your life. You seem to have negotiated it quite well. How was that for you, though? Was it easy, or were you?
Oh no,
it wasn't easy.
No. That transition is hard. As there's not many jobs out there where you're performing in front of 80,000 people.
Right.
So that attention isn't there.
Right.
And you, a lot of times, I used to have dreams all the time that I was still playing. And these lasted probably for the next 3 or 4 years. But then you try to find a passion.
Right.
I think I've been able to do that. Everybody's got to have a purpose.
Yeah.
Find your purpose to get up. And then of course, I've got a family.
Yeah.
If I'm not self-motivated, my family motivates me
Right.
to do the right thing and to be a good example. I'm batting probably maybe 67% right now, but that's that's the nice thing. There's the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement. So, I love what Gandhi says. He says, "Learn today, live." He says, "Live for today, learn forever." So that's where I am. I think it was Gandhi. Could have been his wife. I'm full of all these little snippets of quotes, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Find a passion for what you want to do.
Besides your regular day job, you're also a councilman in the Falls.
Right. Yep. Thank you Nick for mentioning that. That is a passion of mine. Yeah. I feel a lot like government can steamroll over its the citizens. And so I like this. I've always stuck up for the little guy. Growing up, I always felt for the last kid being picked. And I'm not saying, that's always the case, but it can be the case that we don't have a voice in government. And I like to give people that voice. So that's certainly a passion of mine. My wife said, why don't you quit yelling at the TV? Why don't you go do something?
Yeah. And my wife said that to me, too.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything.
So recently, building off my time in L.A., I've working with a couple of guys, Mark Hammer and Rich Maurer with Garage Creative. And we've been fortunate enough to put together a few productions or ideas that we're currently working on. So
great.
What is that? Describe that, please.
So it's basically a collection of sports stories from former athletes and athletes from all men, women, from boxing to professional football.
Is it like a podcast, or is it?
No, this will be like a docuseries, a sports docuseries.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So, and then there's a couple of feature films that I want to do. Some ideas that I've taken to the Browns as far as game shows surrounding, NFL football and the Browns. So we're working with entertainers to build our own channel.
Okay.
For a platform for people to get their intellectual property and ideas out.
Yeah,
so
that's
really
exciting.
Wow,
it really is exciting for me.
Well, I was going to ask about your connection still with the Browns. Now, I know that you were on the Legends program helping. Like I saw you out. I think that was the year after COVID, ended. I think you were there with Hanford Dixon. Am I correct?
Yeah. The Browns have a community of former players. They call it the Legends community.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm a part of that, but I'm glad to ride the coattails of guys like Bernie and Hanford and Eric Metcalf. And they ask us to get out in the community, and they've got a strong initiative of stay in school, stay in the game.
Right.
I think the Browns have it through the Cleveland Browns Foundation. It's their charitable arm that gives back to the community, and I've worked closely with them for the past 30 years since they left. There was quickly going back and from 96 to 99 or 96 to 98, they wanted to keep the spirit alive. And they reached out to former players like myself and Eddie Johnson and Hanford to do things in the community. And we did. That continues to today where, a couple of summers ago I was down at, I'll call it East High School. We were painting the inside of East High School.
Akron East?
Akron East, yeah. It was maybe a month ago that I was here. Ellett had a football camp that the Browns sponsored. Okay. And I came down and was a part of that. And you see the money that the Cleveland Browns Foundation has donated here to Ellett High School.
Right.
And beautiful fields not only here, but at Bookdale and at Hoban as well, and all throughout really northern and northeastern Ohio. So, it's a relationship that I love having, and I stay close with them, and, so.
That's great. What friendships have you made through your career that have really held up for you, like with players or maybe people?
So a couple of guys, that I stay close with, the guys that I played with at Notre Dame, particularly Mike Stonebreaker, Wes Pritchett. We're the three linebackers. A couple other guys. Actually, Wes and I have a podcast. We call it Under the Golden Dome. And then professionally, Metcalf, Hanford Dixon, Mike Tomczak, who was a short time with Cleveland, and Leroy Horde. And we actually have a podcast called In the Dog Pound.
Oh, there you go.
And beyond.
Well, soon. Right. That's our word.
So I stay close with those guys. We yuck it up, and it's funny. Those relationships are more important to me now than they've ever been, because, as you mentioned, some of the things that are unique to our experience, that we kind of have a support group.
Right.
And it's nice to talk to people that understand.
Sure.
And
you'd have to have been in that situation to understand. Yeah.
It's almost like communicating telepathically, and you just understand, and that's really comforting.
Yeah,
it's really comforting.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is From Akron and Beyond. I am Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas and our special guest Frank Stams, former Cleveland Brown, current member of the Cuyahoga Falls Council from Ward 8. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
And since you're a politician now, I'm going to ask you a few questions that will test your political abilities. Maybe not. They're all related to the Cleveland Browns. First of all, did you see the Johnny Manziel documentary?
I have not.
Oh, you haven't? Okay. All right.
I think I've heard a little bit about it, what it's out, and I'm really, I don't know why I'm shocked, but it is shocking to me.
Yeah, what that it was made
the extreme nature of his experience.
Yes.
That based on my experience, that's extreme.
Did you ever meet him?
Once.
Okay.
Yeah, I was introduced to him.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was a big fan.
Yeah. When watching it, we won't get off the track too much here, but in watching it, I was struck by what a great college quarterback he was, and how that just did not translate into the NFL, partially, maybe mostly because of his own personal demons, but
absolutely personal responsibility. I agree. But in some respects, I always thought the Browns were trying to put a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah. That was my point, was that he just didn't have the size. And that kind of like running and scrambling kind of thing can work in college. But I'm not sure it still makes for a long-lasting career in the pros.
Well, yeah, it can work in the pros too. But, you just got to have a coaching staff that says, yeah, go do it.
Right, exactly. Okay. What do you think about the Deshaun Watson acquisition?
Interesting. Wow.
Where do you start, huh?
Yeah. As a player, and really as a person, I always believe people should be given, I guess I shouldn't say always, but I believe in second chances. Mm-hmm. And I know, the circumstances surrounding, with his behavior really I've never seen, talking to a lot of friends, especially female friends, how polarizing that was. Mm-hmm. And even some longtime Browns fans said that, that just wasn't, they just couldn't, hard to swallow.
Yeah.
But, I understand what the Browns are doing, because I think with Baker Mayfield, I think the ceiling was so high. And that was obvious to me in one of the last games he played as a Brown, where they were at Green Bay. Mm-hmm. And, you're going against the NFC, one of the top seeds, if not the top seed. It's a great at the end of the season, you always want to have a measuring stick for where your team is. Couldn't have asked for a better measuring stick. Playoff team on the road. And I think the Browns, they lose that game narrowly. I say within 3 points. Mm-hmm. And to me, they win that game, if not for one thing, quarterback play.
Yeah.
And that's when I think they realized we need a better quarterback.
Right.
And that's why they went so hard after Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a talent. I think he'll be better this year. Mm-hmm. I look for the Browns to be in the playoffs this year. I look for them to be significantly better. You can't really tell anything from preseason. I understand a lot of people's resentment and not, not their cup of tea on that. But maybe can you say that he's served his penance, and now, let's try to judge him going forward.
Right.
As a player.
As a player. And it's hard. You got to separate, because, that your emotion, and getting back to Belichick is, because he did that quite a bit, Bill, maybe not with this particular circumstance, but there were guys that he would bring on the team. I remember Andre Rison being one of them. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of guys that he would try to bring on the team. Maybe they realized that they're getting a second chance. They would assimilate to the culture there with the team, and go on to have a great career. Some fail, some succeed.
Right.
So hopefully that Deshaun Watson succeeds.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think those last few games was a fair way to assess how he's going to play this coming season. I hope not, because he was rusty.
And this is why I was so disappointed he's not getting snaps here as many. I think they're wrong in not getting him as many snaps as possible in the preseason, because he needs reps.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just after 2 years of not playing or whatever it was.
Right.
It's hard to come back. But as a quarterback, I think he's a quarterback that gets you into the playoffs and possibly gets you into the Super Bowl.
I guess my biggest worry actually about the whole thing was the draft picks they gave up for him. That's pretty heavy stuff. I mean, that makes it a real gamble, right?
Absolutely. And Chris Collinsworth talked about this in that first preseason game. Trico asked him, he said, what are your thoughts on? And, what's the Browns' identity? You were hearing a lot of run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. Mm-hmm. Well, now you've got a quarterback that you've paid ungodly money for. Mm-hmm. And all you're going to do is run the ball? Did you really need that quarterback?
Right.
And so that's the rub.
Right
there,
right,
and I don't envy Kevin Stefanski on trying to balance that together, because that's got to be hard.
Well, that was a very natural segue, because my next question for you is: Kevin Stefanski is going into his 4th year as head coach. Do you think he's on the hot seat?
Couldn't be any higher. That typically, as a player, and probably as a coach too, they give you about 3 years to prove your worth. Mm-hmm. And he's and he knows that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I'm sure when he listens to the show, he realizes that.
Yeah.
And we're all big boys.
Right.
Right. Paid a lot of money to do this, and people expect you to win. But he is definitely on the hot seat.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he started so strong, with that first season, right? They were 11-5, right. I think.
Right.
It's kind of gone down since then. So,
and that's not a trend that is going to.
Not a winning trend.
That's not. Yeah, exactly.
My last little question for you, the most controversial one. What do you think of those white uniforms that they'll be wearing on a few games?
Oh, it makes no difference. I mean, I really don't have an opinion. They can wear all orange, all brown, all white. I
kind of like them. They look like some out of Star Wars.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Frank, it's been great having you on.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, buddy.
And answering our questions and learning more about you and your life. It's been terrific. We definitely took the show a little beyond this time, right?
Big time, Nick? Way beyond. In a good way.
Well, absolutely. So, again, thank you much. Frank Stams is being our guest on this episode. This has been From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with Nick Nicholas, and we will see you next time.